The war on Aris had ended, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the sound of battle. The once thriving city lay in ruins. Towers that had touched the clouds now stood broken, their walls cracked, their windows shattered. Streets that once carried laughter and voices of children were filled with dust, twisted metal, and the faint echo of memories. Among the broken stones walked Luma, a healer of her people. Her steps were slow, as if each one carried the weight of the past. She moved through the ruins with tired eyes, searching, always searching. The long war had taken much from her people, homes, lives, and hope. But for Luma it had taken something far greater. It had taken her daughter. Sira was only 7 when the war reached the city's heart. On that day the shelters had been filled with frightened children, hidden beneath stone arches where the walls were thickest. Luma had been tending to the wounded when the ground shook and fire swept through the streets. She had been told that no one from the children's shelter survived. Reports said it was destroyed in the final wave of destruction, yet Luma's heart refused to let go. Every morning, even after the war had ended, she returned to the ruins of the shelter. She would kneel by the blackened stones, brush the dust from broken walls, and listen, as if a small voice might still call out to her. She told herself it was foolish. She told herself she should accept the truth. But still she searched. On this day, the sky above Aris was strangely clear. The war had left scars across the land, but the smoke had finally lifted. Sunlight poured over the ruined city, falling on broken statues and cracked roads. Luma walked slowly through the remains of the market square, where vendors had once sung songs to sell their fruits and cloths. Now only silence remained. Her people were trying to rebuild. She could hear the faint sounds of workers in the distance, moving stone and setting beams. But here near the shelter no one came. It was a place of sorrow, avoided by those who could not bear to look back. Luma knelt near the shelter's entrance, her hand resting on the cool stone. She closed her eyes and whispered as she had whispered every day, "Sira, if you are out there, I will find you." Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. Memories returned to her, unbidden. Sira's laugh, high and bright, chasing fireflies in the garden, the way her daughter's small hands would hold onto her arm, refusing to let go when storms shook the night, the way she used to hum when she was falling asleep. Each memory was sharp, cutting deeper into her heart, but she clung to them because memories were all she had left. The war had been fought between her people and those who came from the stars. Humans, they were called, strange beings with strong bodies and unyielding will. To her people, they were both enemy and mystery. The humans had fought fiercely, but even they had lost much. Rumors spread that humans had deserted battle lines, vanishing in the chaos. No one trusted them fully. Luma had never met one herself. To her, humans were shadows on the other side of the smoke. Yet part of her, the part that still searched among the ruins, wondered if perhaps anyone, human or alien, might have taken pity on the children. The day grew long. The sun climbed high and the ruins glowed in its light. Luma rose from her place near the shelter and began to walk again. She passed an overturned cart, its wheels broken. She paused by a shattered fountain, its waters long gone. Every turn she made, every corner she searched, she hoped for a sign. But as the hours passed, no sign came. Only the silence of loss remained. When the shadows grew long and the workers' voices faded, Luma returned to the healer's tent. The people there greeted her kindly, but their eyes carried pity. They knew where she had gone and why. They said nothing because words could not fill the emptiness she carried. That night she sat by a small lamp and held the last piece of Sira she owned, a cloth doll with faded colors. It was singed at the edge but still whole. She pressed it to her chest and let the silence of the night surround her. The war was over, yet inside her heart the battle continued. She did not know that beyond the ruins, across the broken land, her daughter still lived. She did not know that someone she had been taught to fear, was walking even now, carrying a sleeping child in his arms. The silence of loss was about to be broken. The city of Aris was still healing. Each day the people worked to rebuild broken homes and mend shattered streets. The air carried the sound of hammers and stone being moved, mixed with quiet voices of those who had survived. Yet even with these efforts, the city felt empty, as if a shadow still lingered after the war. Luma walked through the streets that morning, carrying her small bag of healing herbs. She planned to visit the workers who had injured themselves lifting stone beams. Her mind was heavy as always, drifting back to her daughter, but she forced herself to move. Healing others gave her purpose even when her own heart was still broken. The sun rose higher, casting golden light on the ruins. Dust floated in the air, glowing as if the city itself tried to breathe again. As she reached the main gate of the city, she noticed a murmur among the guards. They stood straighter, their hands tightening on their staffs, their eyes fixed on the road beyond. Luma slowed her steps. She followed their gaze and saw a figure walking down the long path leading into the city. At first, it was only a dark shape against the bright light of the morning. Then, as he drew closer, she saw that it was a man. His clothes were torn, his armor blackened with ash. His steps were heavy yet steady. In his arms, he carried something close to his chest. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. One whispered, "It is a human." The word spread quickly, and soon workers left their tasks to gather at the gate. People gasped and muttered, for no human had entered the city since the war ended. To many, humans were still seen as enemies, their presence a reminder of battles lost and scars earned. Luma's breath caught as the man came closer. She could now see more clearly what he carried. It was a child. Her small frame, wrapped in a worn blanket, rested safely in his arms. The child's head leaned against his shoulder, her breathing soft and steady. Luma's heart stopped. Her hands trembled, and she felt the world blur around her. She knew that face, the curve of the cheeks, the strands of hair falling across the brow. It was Sira, her daughter, alive. She stepped forward before she could think, her voice breaking free. "Sira!" The sound startled the crowd. The child stirred, opening her eyes slowly. When those familiar eyes blinked and searched the crowd, they landed on Luma. A faint smile touched the child's lips. "Mother," she whispered weakly. Luma ran forward, tears falling freely. She reached the man, her arms outstretched. The human looked down at her, his face tired, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, yet there was no malice in his gaze. He knelt and gently placed Sira in her mother's arms. Luma held her daughter close, pressing her cheek against the child's hair. The warmth, the steady heartbeat, the soft breath, it was real. Her child was alive. For the first time since the war, her heart was filled not with sorrow but with light. The crowd, however, did not share her relief. Murmurs rose louder. "Why is he here?" someone asked. "What does he want?" another whispered. A guard stepped forward, his staff raised. "Human, you are not welcome here." The man raised his hands slowly, showing he carried no weapon. His voice was quiet but firm. "I am called Rian. I found the child in the ruins. I protected her. I brought her back." Luma looked up at him, still holding Sira close. "You saved her?" Ryan nodded once. His shoulders sagged as if the weight of many days had pressed on him. "She was trapped when the shelter fell. I stayed with her until it was safe to move. I could not leave her behind." Some in the crowd scoffed. "Lies. Humans bring only ruin." Others frowned with suspicion, yet a few looked uncertain, their eyes moving between the child in Luma's arms and the weary man before them. Luma rose to her feet, keeping Sira close. She faced the guards, her voice strong. "This man carried my daughter back to me. Whatever you believe of humans, he has done what none of us could. He has given me back my child." The guards hesitated, torn between duty and doubt. The people watched in silence, their distrust clashing with the sight of a mother reunited with her child. Rian lowered his gaze, as if ready to accept their judgment. His body swayed slightly, the exhaustion clear. Luma noticed the burns along his arm, the torn edges of his armor, the blood that had dried on his side. He had suffered much, yet he had carried Sira all this way without letting her go. Her heart, once filled with fear of humans, now saw only the truth before her. This man had saved her daughter. Without him, Sira would have been lost forever. She placed her free hand gently on his arm. "You are safe here. You are not my enemy." The words spread through the crowd like a ripple. Some turned away, unwilling to accept them. Others remained still, uncertain but silent. The guards lowered their staffs, though their eyes stayed watchful. For Luma, none of that mattered. In her arms was her child. Beside her stood the man who had saved her. The silence of loss had ended. A new chapter had begun, one she never thought possible. The night after Rian carried Sira into the city, the streets of Eris were restless. Word of the human's arrival had spread quickly. Some people whispered that he was a deserter. a soldier who had abandoned his side. Others believed he was a spy, sent to stir trouble now that peace was fragile. Yet a smaller number said something different. They spoke of the girl he had brought back, alive when all hope was gone. Inside a small healer's tent, Luma sat with Sira curled safely in her arms. The child was weak, but she breathed easily now, comforted by her mother's touch. Every so often her small hand reached out for the cloth doll that lay beside her, the same one Luma had kept through the months of sorrow. Now it was back in Sira's grasp, and she smiled faintly as she drifted to sleep. Rian sat nearby, his back against the wall of the tent. His armor had been removed, showing torn clothing beneath. His arm was bandaged where burns had left their mark, and his face carried the weight of many sleepless nights. He said little, his eyes always watching the entrance as if expecting to be removed at any moment. Luma studied him in the quiet glow of the lamp. He looked nothing like the monster her people had described when they spoke of humans. He looked worn, weary, and very much alive, carrying the same pain of loss she knew too well. At last she asked, her voice soft, "Why did you not leave her?" "You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you." Ryan lifted his eyes, his gaze steady but tired. "When I found her, she was trapped under stone. She was calling for her mother. I pulled her free. She clung to me and would not let go. If I had left her, she would have died alone. I could not do that." Luma frowned slightly. "Even though she was not your kind?" He nodded, especially because she was not. "War takes enough. It does not need to take children too." The words lingered in the air, heavier than stone. Luma held Sira closer, her heart stirred by his honesty. She wanted to doubt him, to keep the wall of mistrust her people had built. Yet each time she looked at her daughter, safe and alive, she could not deny the truth. Later that night, one of the city guards entered. He looked uneasy, glancing at Rian before addressing Luma. "The council wishes to question the human. They do not trust him." Luma's voice grew firm. "He has saved my daughter. That is truth enough." The guard hesitated, then lowered his gaze. "Even so, many want him gone. They fear what his presence may mean." When the guard left, silence filled the tent again. Ryan leaned his head back against the wall. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "They are not wrong to fear me. To them I am the enemy. To my own people I am a deserter. I belong nowhere now." Luma looked at him puzzled. "A deserter?" He gave a faint nod. "When the signal came to retreat, I did not follow. I stayed with her instead. My commanders will mark me as lost or worse, but I made my choice." His eyes softened as he glanced at Sira. "I made it the moment she put her hand in mine." Luma sat in silence, hearing the faint sound of her daughter's breathing. She realized that this man had sacrificed everything, his place, his honor, perhaps even his home, because he chose to protect a child who was not his own. The thought unsettled her. In war, people rarely acted with kindness. Yet here sat a man who had given up all for a promise only his heart demanded. As dawn approached, Luma stepped outside the tent. The air was cool, carrying the scent of stone dust and smoke. Around her, the city stirred with life. She could hear murmurs of her people still speaking of the human. Some called him danger. Some called him liar. Few called him savior. She looked back into the tent where Ryan sat in the soft light, his hand resting on his knee, his head lowered as if weighed down by memories. He did not appear dangerous. He appeared lonely. For the first time, Luma felt something she had not expected. Gratitude. Gratitude not only for her daughter's life, but for the man who had carried her through fire and rubble, never letting go. That morning, when Sira awoke, she reached not only for her mother but also for Rian. Her small hand stretched out toward him, her eyes shining with simple trust. Ryan hesitated, then gently took her hand in his own. His rough fingers closed softly around hers, and for a moment, the heaviness in his eyes eased. Luma watched the scene quietly. Her people may still see him as enemy, but her daughter did not. Children saw truth without the burden of history, and perhaps that was what made this bond so rare, so powerful. As the sun rose higher, Luma realized something. Whatever the council decided, whatever the people whispered, she could not let them cast him out. For he was no ordinary soldier. He was the unlikely guardian who had carried her daughter back from the shadows of war. The council hall of Eris stood in the center of the ruined city. Its high stone walls had survived the war, though cracks now ran through them and its once bright banners hung torn and faded. On this day the hall was crowded, filled with voices of anger, fear, and suspicion. At the center of the hall stood Ryan, the human who had carried Sira back. His clothes were patched, his wounds still healing, yet his posture was calm. He faced the council without raising his voice, though the eyes of the people burned with distrust. Luma stood at his side, holding Sira close. The child clung to her mother's robe but kept glancing at Ryan, her small hand reaching out whenever he shifted. This bond between them, so natural and simple, only added to the unease in the room. One of the elders struck his staff against the floor. "This man is an enemy. He should be sent away before he brings danger to us." Another council member nodded firmly. "The war may be over, but scars remain. Can we trust a human in our city? Their armies left us broken. Their weapons burned our homes." Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. People spoke of ruined villages, of families lost. To them, Ryan was not a savior, but a symbol of their suffering. Luma's heart ached as she listened. She understood their pain, for she carried her own. Yet as she looked at her daughter, alive and safe in her arms, she knew the truth. Without this man, Sira would still be lost. She lifted her voice above the crowd. "You speak of what the war has taken, but look here at what it has given back. This man chose not to fight, not to destroy, but to protect. He gave his strength to save a child he did not know. If he were truly our enemy, would he have done this?" Her words quieted some, but not all. One elder leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Or perhaps he saved her to win our trust. A clever trick to place himself among us." The doubt spread quickly. People nodded, whispering again. Rian finally spoke. His voice was steady, though his eyes were heavy with truth. "I cannot erase what my people have done, nor what yours have lost. I do not ask for trust. I ask only that you see her alive and know that I did not leave her behind. Whatever you choose for me, that will not change." For a moment the hall was silent. The weight of his words hung in the air. Then a voice from the back rose, loud and bitter. "Send him away. He does not belong here." Others echoed the cry, their fear and anger mixing together. Sira stirred in Luma's arms. She pressed her small hands against her mother's chest and whispered, "Do not let them take him." Her voice was faint, but clear enough to silence those nearby. The people stared at the child. Her innocence cut through their doubts, though not enough to erase them. Some softened, while others turned away, unwilling to listen. That night outside the council hall, the city buzzed with unrest. Small groups argued in the streets. Some spoke of kindness, saying the human had proven himself. Others spoke of danger, saying one act could not wash away years of blood. In the healer's tent, Luma sat with Rian. Sira lay between them, already asleep, her small hand resting near his. The lamp's light flickered across the room, casting long shadows. Luma broke the silence. "They do not see what I see. They only see their pain." Ryan nodded slowly. "I understand. To them I am nothing but a reminder. I cannot blame them." She studied him for a moment. "But you stayed even when you knew this would happen." "Why?" He looked at Sira, his voice quiet. "Because she needed me. And perhaps because I needed her too." Luma felt the truth in his words. She had lived through loss, through silence and sorrow, and she knew the look of someone who carried the same weight. This man was not just a soldier or a stranger. He was someone who had given up everything to protect a child who was not his own. Yet outside, tension grew. There were whispers of driving him out by force. The city was divided. Some wanted to honor his sacrifice, while others wanted to push him away before he became a danger. The days that followed were filled with unease. Guards watched him closely. Families kept their children indoors when he walked by. Yet there were also small moments of kindness. A baker left bread near the healer's tent. A worker brought clean water for him without speaking. Quiet signs that not all had closed their hearts, but the louder voices belonged to those who feared. And fear, Luma knew, could spread faster than hope. She sat awake one night, watching Sira sleep peacefully beside Rian, and wondered how long this fragile balance could last. The war had ended, yet another battle had begun, a battle not of armies but of trust. And in the heart of that battle stood one man, one child, and one mother, caught between the anger of a city and the truth of what had been saved. The days in Eris grew tense, Ryan remained in the healer's tent with Luma and Sira, but the city outside was divided. Some believed his presence was dangerous. Others whispered that his actions showed a different side of humanity. The council had not yet decided his fate, and until they did, every step he took was watched with suspicion. One evening, after the workers returned to their homes and the streets grew quiet, Luma sat across from Ryan. The lamp on the table flickered softly, casting a gentle glow across his face. Sira lay curled in her blanket, already asleep, her breathing calm and steady. Luma studied the man in front of her. His eyes were tired, yet when they rested on Sira, they softened in a way that spoke louder than words. She wanted to understand him more. She wanted to know why he had chosen to protect a child who was not his own, even at the cost of his own people's trust. At last, she asked quietly, "Why did you stay with her when you could have gone back to your own side? What made you give up everything?" Ryan leaned back against the wall, his gaze lost in memory. For a long time, he did not answer. Then, with a deep breath, he began, "When I was young, I had a sister. She was small, with a laugh that could fill a room. During one of the first battles, our home was attacked. She was trapped inside while soldiers rushed past. No one stayed behind. Everyone was too afraid. I tried to reach her, but I was held back. By the time I broke free, it was too late." His voice grew softer, but every word carried the weight of his sorrow. "That day I swore that if I ever had the chance, I would not let another child die alone. When I found Sira in the ruins, I remembered my sister's voice. I could not leave her, no matter what it cost me." Luma's heart tightened. She looked at him, not as an enemy, not as a stranger, but as a man carrying a promise made out of love and loss. His story was simple, but it explained everything. He had not saved Sira for glory, nor for trickery. He had saved her because he could not bear to break his vow. She lowered her gaze to Sira, who slept peacefully. "Then she was not only saved by your strength, she was saved by your memory." Rian gave a faint nod. "Perhaps, but in truth she saved me too. Carrying her reminded me that I still had something worth protecting. Without her, I think I would have been lost." Silence filled the tent for a while, but it was not the heavy silence of grief. It was the calm silence of understanding. The next day, Luma walked through the streets with Sira. People stopped to watch, their eyes following the child who had returned from the ruins. Some smiled faintly while others shook their heads. A few whispered cruel things about the human, but Sira ignored them. She simply held her mother's hand and hummed softly, her steps light despite the scars around her. Later, when they returned, Luma found Ryan sitting outside the tent, his gaze on the horizon. She sat beside him, the evening breeze brushing against her face. "The people may not see the truth yet," she said, "but I do. You are not here to harm us. You gave me back my daughter, and no voice in the council can take that truth away." Ryan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I do not need them to believe me. It is enough that she lives." But Luma knew it was not enough. The council would not let the matter rest. Already whispers grew louder, and the city stood on edge. If they cast him out, he would be alone, hunted by both sides. The thought unsettled her deeply. That night, Sira woke from a dream and whispered to her mother, "Do not let them take him away. He is family now." The child's words stayed with Luma long after she soothed her back to sleep. Family. A word so simple, yet so powerful. Could a human truly become family to them? Could he find a place here, in a world that still carried scars? She did not know the answer, but she knew one thing. Ryan's story, his hidden truth, had shown her that humanity was not only war and fire. It was also promises kept, burdens carried, and lives saved. As dawn broke, Luma stood by the tent's entrance and watched the sun rise over the broken city. She felt a spark of hope, small but steady, glowing within her heart. The hidden truth had changed her, and if it could change her, perhaps one day it could change others too. The city of Eris was quiet at dawn, but the calm did not last. From the outer hills came the sound of movement, distant, steady, and growing louder. Scouts rushed through the streets, warning the people. A group of enemy survivors, remnants of the war, had gathered strength and were marching toward the city. Though the war had ended, not all enemies had accepted peace. The council called the people to prepare. Weapons were scarce, walls were weak, and many feared that the city would not withstand another fight. Voices rose in panic while others shouted in anger. In the midst of it all, suspicion turned once again toward Ryan. "It is because of him," some cried. "The enemy comes for the human." Ryan heard their words but did not answer. He stood quietly at the edge of the healer's tent, his eyes scanning the horizon. He knew the truth. The enemy remnants did not march for him alone. They came because they wished to destroy what little hope remained. Inside the tent, Sira clung to her mother. "Mother, will they hurt us again?" Her small voice trembled. Luma brushed her daughter's hair gently. "Not while we stand together." But even as she spoke, her heart was heavy. She looked at Ryan, uncertain of what choice the city would make. By midday, the enemy was close enough that their banners could be seen. Dust rose behind them as they advanced. The guards of Eris readied themselves, though many hands shook. Families hid inside broken homes, whispering prayers for safety. The council gathered once more in the hall. Their voices were sharp with fear. "We cannot face them," one said. "We must abandon the city," another argued. "If we flee, we lose everything we have rebuilt." And again the finger turned toward Ryan. "If we cast him out, perhaps they will leave us be." Luma stood, her voice rising above theirs. "You are blind. They do not march for him alone. They march to finish what they began. Sending him away will not save us. It will only weaken us." Still, the hall was divided. Many wanted him gone, fearing his presence brought danger. Others hesitated, remembering the child he had saved. As the argument raged, Sira slipped into the hall unnoticed. She walked straight to Ryan and took his hand. Her small voice rang clear in the silence. "Please do not let them take him away. He kept me safe when all was dark. He will keep us safe again." Her words fell like stones into still water. The people murmured, uneasy but moved. The innocence of a child spoke louder than the voices of fear. That evening, as the enemy drew nearer, the city gathered at the walls. The guards stood ready, though their numbers were few. Ryan stepped forward, his figure tall against the fading light. "You do not trust me," he said to the crowd, "and perhaps you never will. But your children stand behind these walls. Your families are here. If you allow me, I will fight to protect them, not as a soldier of the past war, but as one who will not let another home fall." The council did not answer, but the silence that followed was enough. The people stepped aside, letting him take his place among the defenders. When the enemy finally struck, the battle was fierce. The remnants poured through the broken fields, shouting as they came. Eris shook under their charge. The guards raised their weapons, but fear pulled at their strength. It was then that Ryan's voice rose above the clash. "Stand firm. Protect your home. Protect your children." His courage spread like fire. The guards steadied. The workers picked up stones and tools, and the people who once doubted him began to fight alongside him. Luma worked quickly among the wounded, her hands steady though her heart raced. And through it all, Sira clung to the edge of the wall, calling out whenever Ryan moved too far, her small voice carrying strength to him. Though outnumbered, the defenders of Eris held their ground. Ryan moved with skill, not striking in rage, but shielding those around him, pushing back with calm strength. Where others faltered, he stood, and where he stood, others found courage. By the time the sun set, the enemy remnants began to retreat. Their banners fell, their strength broken against the walls of a city that refused to fall again. The people of Eris, weary but alive, raised their voices not in fear but in triumph. As the dust settled, Ryan stood at the center of the wall, his chest rising with heavy breaths. Around him, the guards and workers looked at him with new eyes. No longer only as a human, no longer only as a stranger, but as one who had fought beside them when it mattered most. Luma climbed the wall with Sira in her arms. She looked at him, her voice steady with gratitude. "You did more than protect my child. You gave strength back to my people." Ryan lowered his gaze humbly. "I only did what was right." But in the hearts of the people, something had changed. Fear had not vanished, but trust had begun to grow. The turning point had come not in the clash of weapons, but in the courage of a man who chose to protect what was not his own. And though the night carried scars of the battle, it also carried hope. Hope that perhaps the walls between their kinds could begin to fall. The morning after the battle was quiet. The city of Eris, though scarred and weary, still stood. The streets were filled with smoke from broken fires, and the scent of dust lingered in the air. Yet there was also something new in the voices of the people. They spoke not only of fear but of survival. They had defended their home together, and for the first time since the war ended, hope felt real. Luma walked through the streets with Sira by her side. The child's small hand clutched her mother's robe as she skipped lightly, her laughter bright despite the ruins around her. People paused to watch, some smiling, some whispering. It was not the sound of walls being rebuilt that gave them strength that morning. It was the sound of a child's joy returning to a broken city. Near the outer wall, Ryan stood alone. His armor was cracked, his clothes torn, and his wounds still fresh. Yet his posture was steady, his eyes on the horizon. He had not left the wall since the night before, as if guarding the city was a duty that could not end with dawn. When Luma and Sira approached, he turned and gave a faint smile. Sira ran to him at once, her arms wrapping around his waist. "You stayed," she said softly. "I promised I would," Ryan answered, his voice quiet but filled with warmth. He placed a gentle hand on her head, as though reminding himself that she was safe. The council gathered soon after, standing before the people of Eris. The elders were silent for a long time, their faces troubled. Finally, the eldest among them spoke. "This man is not of our kind. He came to us as an enemy, yet he has fought as a brother. He saved one child, and through her he saved us all. We cannot deny what we have seen with our own eyes." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some still frowned, unwilling to let go of years of pain, but others nodded slowly. A mother whispered that she would trust him, for he had protected her child when the wall was breached. A worker said he had fought side by side with the human and seen no fear in his heart. The voices of doubt were not gone, but they were no longer the loudest. Luma stepped forward, her daughter in her arms. "I once believed I had lost everything. I walked through silence, clinging only to memories. But he gave me back my child. He carried her through fire and ruin when all others turned away. If we cannot honor such a gift, then what does our survival mean?" Her words touched the people, and silence filled the square once more. All eyes turned to Ryan. He stood with quiet dignity, his head slightly bowed as if unworthy of their praise. At last the elder raised his staff. "Then let it be known. This man is no longer enemy nor stranger. From this day he will be counted among us, not by his birth but by his choice. For family is not always of blood. Sometimes it is of sacrifice." The words rang across the square, and the people lowered their heads in respect. Even those who still doubted could not speak against what had been declared. Sira's eyes lit up with joy. She tugged at Ryan's hand and whispered, "Did you hear? You are family now." Ryan knelt beside her, his voice breaking with quiet emotion. "Family. I have not heard that word spoken to me for many years." He looked at Luma, and she met his gaze with understanding. That evening, the city held no great feast, for food was scarce, but they lit small lamps across the streets, their glow chasing away the shadows of war. Families gathered together, speaking in softer tones, no longer only of fear, but also of tomorrow. Ryan sat beside Luma and Sira near the healer's tent. The child leaned against him, her doll clutched in her hand. For the first time in many nights, she slept without fear. Luma watched them quietly, her heart filled with gratitude. She had thought she would never see her daughter again, and yet here she was, safe in her arms, safe because of a man she once would have called enemy. She spoke softly into the night. "Perhaps this is how peace begins, not in treaties or words, but in small acts that prove we can choose differently." Ryan nodded slowly. "Then let us keep choosing. For her sake, for all of them." The lamps flickered in the wind, their light spreading across the city. Though the ruins still stood and scars remained, there was something stronger than sorrow in the air. There was a bond born not of war, but of love, sacrifice, and hope. And so in the city of Eris, where once silence ruled, a new chapter began. A mother, her daughter, and a man who had carried her through the darkest days now stood together as family. Humanity was no longer seen only as destroyers. They could also be protectors. The war had taken much, but it could not take away what had been built here. For in the heart of a broken city, among the ruins and the ash, a new bond had been formed, one that promised a brighter dawn for both kinds.